Movies on TV in the early 90s was still a place of random magic. On the weekends, it was rare to catch movies off cable, so when you came across a decent one, after channel surfing through wave after wave, you stuck with it, wrote it out. And one movie that kept popping up serendipitously on my TV was a movie called 20 Bucks. It follows a single $20 bill as it interweaves its way through the lives of hundreds of different people, all from increasingly diverse backgrounds, but all pulled back to the narrative gravity of this legal tender. Out of an ATM, into the wind, then with an immigrant to his new son-in-law, a poor lady buying lottery tickets, a criminal, a teenager, stranger and stranger combinations of people all come in contact with the same piece of paper. It's an interesting lesson, and it made me think. In a law firm, how many diverse hands touch every document and help in every process and experience to make the legal profession come to life for their clients day after day? As demographics in the legal consumer marketplace expand in diversity, are law firm demographics mirroring the change to better serve that diverse client base? Or is the magic happening already and we just need to expand our definitions, switch our channels, connect our narratives? Let's find out.
Lawsome, the podcast for law firms. Powered by Consultwebs.
Welcome back to Lawsome, the only podcast for law firms that can see clearly now because the rain is gone. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain the legal community on the latest in personal and professional developments. I am Jake Sanders. With me is Paul Julius, and together, it's Jake and Paul, y'all.
Hey.
Hey.
And that's as far as we're going with that.
So there you go.
Want to hear what's on the show? I'll tell you what's on the show.
Tell us on the show. Just come on.
We talk about the state of diversity in law with articles from Above the Law and Law.com. And we interview Stephanie Thompson and discuss her writings on the expanding definitions of diversity and inclusion in the legal profession. And as always, we put our guests on the hot seat with 5 questions we ask everyone.
Pull up a plate. It's the Hot Takes Buffet.
The articles today are from Above the Law, Law.com, some stuff on LinkedIn. It was a melange. It was a very diverse offering here today on the Hot Take Buffet. But the one author that we kept going to was Renwei Chung. Her 2 articles are Diversity in the Legal Profession Has Flatlined Since the Great Recession. Who is to blame? And then the next one is Stop Blaming the Pipeline for the Lack of Diversity in the Legal Profession and Start Investing in It. So a little twofer where she answers her own question.
I saw that.
So this was great. I loved this. I found her on Twitter and made sure she understood because she started both of these articles, one of them with Nas rap lyrics and one from J. Cole. And it's interesting because it sort of sets the tale. I'm reminded of certain novels where you read a bit of poetry in the beginning to set the tale, and then they kind of like set you in on it. So I appreciated this. It was coming from a diverse place. I'm glad we're talking about it because I think it's a conversation that more people should be having. We talked to Stephanie later on about it feels weird for me to talk about this stuff because I'm just this white dude. And I have to embrace that in my narrative. And, we were just talking about our Caucasian roots.
Yes.
It's interesting to talk about this, but I feel it's necessary. And Stephanie breaks it apart. Renwei even breaks into it too, is that it's actually more about economics and access and less about this touchy-feely thing like I need to make sure I'm letting all the different types of voices in this diverse choir. It's actually the one thing that's been holding things back is the economy. And so what did you think about this first, diversity in the legal profession has flatlined since the Great Recession? Let's start with that one. What did you think about that one, Paul?
I mean, I think they both kind of point to the same thing where it's not that people are shunning diversity. It's not that people are unwelcoming of people with different backgrounds or anything like that, but it's that the people who make it through and who survived the recession and who were still able to go to law school, all kind of came from this homogenous upper class, middle upper class, who can afford, like if you're a single mom, or if you're the child of a single mom, and you got to take care of your siblings when mom's at work, maybe mom's working a double shift. The kids who come from an economically advantaged background are going to have an advantage. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody.
But I think it's interesting because it simplifies the discussion. It's actually about the pipeline and the infrastructure. And it feeds on itself.
It feeds on itself. I mean, this pipeline, you have to look at it and say there is this pipeline, but the pipeline is built, you can only set foot on this path if you have a certain amount of money. I think you're right. It just comes down to economies, man.
Oh, we get into it. And so Renway says, her favorite inclusive initiatives being offered at law firms, 1L summer diversity programs, where people can see what a career would look like into the future, to get that vision going on earlier, to start having more diverse representations, in popular culture and stuff. And so it's widening. Stephanie Thompson talks about how diversity in class is actually a thing. Like people, depending on where they came from, are in your law firm working as paralegals or clerks, or they're bringing a diversity of opinions. But does that count as diversity on the tally sheet for the census? So it's not just from the very top to the shareholders to the lawyers, but it's actually everyone who works on a document, a legal document, or helps push a case through or work with clients in a legal capacity. How are we defining those things? And so if you're talking about a law firm, there is a certain type of role modeling that needs to happen, because if you can't uphold the laws, the constitutional laws that guarantee egalitarian access to these things at your law firm, which stands up for the Constitution, there's a cognitive dissonance for me there. That's why I'm thinking that lawyers have a right to do this, and they do. But you need to make sure that it's not just about the lip service, it's about engaging. And then once you have these pipelines in place, that you have supportive structures that continue and can help broadcast this so that more people are attracted to the legal profession from diverse communities. That's why it felt so scary. Again, here we go into these crazy episodes. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but
I don't think so. I mean, I think you make a good point. But I think there's this other side too. And we talked about this a little bit after the episode, is that it's weird, is that we're trying to nail this down to the legal profession, and we're using these. I mean, this article is amazing. And there's some pretty stark numbers in here. The one thing she says is in 2009, Black /African American lawyers represented 1.71% of law firm partners.
Right. Today,
and this article was written last year, same demographic, Black /African American lawyers represent 1.81%.
Mm-hmm.
So
0.1%.
In what, 9 years?
Mm-hmm.
That means that there's something. I mean, maybe we can blame it on the recession. What was it before? But it seems to me that there's just it's not there in the first place. It's not just the law. I mean, look at it to people who need the law. I mean, access to justice, there's a huge problem.
Huge gap.
And that's economic, and maybe that's what we're seeing reflected here is this general thing of, if you've got money, then the law is going to work for you. And if you don't, too bad.
That's how it is with tech, and that's how it is with marketing and advertising. And, it's about access. But it's cool to talk to people who are writing articles that are promoting this, because I think the more we talk about it, the more it just becomes the way we do business.
These are important conversations to have.
Yeah. So, but Stephanie's starting it and changing the definition, and Renway is like bringing in all these different influences, with rap lyrics, and, how does that impact, the legal community? It's just, we need more of that to survive, because as our legal consumer base becomes more diverse, we as a legal profession need to increase in diversity to meet their needs.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Any lawyer looking to grow their business online can generate more leads from their website by hiring Consultwebs. After working with lawyers exclusively since 1999, we've tested thousands of web designs and marketing strategies, so we know what flips and what flops. For more information, visit www.consultwebs.com today.
And now, for a lawsome interview.
Stephanie Thompson is currently the marketing communications manager at the law firm of Q-Tac Rock, a U.S. law firm focusing on litigation, public finance, as well as corporate and real estate law with over 500 attorneys at locations from coast to coast. With several English degrees and experience in education, proposal writing, and the publishing industry, Stephanie has written exquisitely on legal marketing as well as the concepts of equality, diversity, and inclusion in the law firm setting. And it's those articles that brought her to us. And we are honored to have her aboard the Lawsome Podcast today. Thanks for coming aboard, Stephanie.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Excellent. So gender equality, inclusion, diversity, a lot of these once seemingly like innocuous HR words. Like I would have seen this in a staff training video. Recently, it's been seeping into the lexicon of America, and it's taken on an almost ideological flavor, which makes it seem like a hot button issue, something to avoid in the boardroom. What do you think the role of the legal profession is as a role model on how to tackle these issues?
Well, first, I think these issues aren't necessarily hot button issues anymore. I think perhaps for maybe for baby boomers and older Gen Xers, they might have been, we were brought up to not discuss religion or politics
At the dinner table, yeah.
Right, or anywhere in public, heaven forbid. I think that's changed a little bit with the younger Gen Xers and the millennials, just in general in society, not necessarily in the legal profession. But I think that's probably making a shift also. I think law firms, as far as how to tackle these issues and being a role model, they're not necessarily role models in general, but I'd say it's important to set examples for other firms, for employees and clients. It's easy to make everyone feel welcome in the boardroom, at the high level there. It's a little harder to get your employees and your attorneys to welcome everybody at the lunch table. And I think that's where a lot of the work needs to happen. So I think hiring practices, decision-making practices, and things like that are definitely something that we can do better on.
So you've written about the definition of diversity in the legal profession and how it can be kind of stretched, which in turn widens the definition of who it is that really works on legal problems. So there was a fascinating back and forth with you and Michael Simon on LinkedIn about what constitutes legal work and what that definition is. So I wanted you to kind of expand on those two pieces you wrote about class diversity and then also diversity in the legal profession, because I thought that was brilliant.
Sure. Yeah. We're seeing a definite trend of companies when they're seeking legal work. I shouldn't say legal firms, legal work. They're going for the bottom line, not necessarily the big tall buildings with people in suits. They're looking for who can get the work done quickly and a little less expensively and still maintain the same quality. So they're going to these alternative legal service companies. They might be people who have their JD but aren't necessarily practicing, or they may be paralegals. They may be people like that. So we're seeing a lot of that happen. We're also seeing, staff in these established law firms take on more of a role so that the attorneys can do what they do best, and then they can let those of us who support them do what we do best. Legal assistants, paralegals, document processors, legal marketers, proposal writers. These are all things that really take a lot of immersion. Like, you may not necessarily have the education, but once you're doing the job, it does take a lot of acumen, and that's something that you can only gain over time and, learning from your attorneys and learning from the professionals in your company. So it seems kind of ironic, and this is what I wrote about it. It seems ironic that we're all talking about diversity and inclusiveness and engagement, which is kind of the action word of the whole process. Diversity and inclusion are great, but you have to have the engagement part of it, which is actually including people, walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And so, it's like I said, it's ironic that, they're touting all this, and yet most of the time it only refers to attorney diversity. How many women partners do you have? How many women partners of color? How many equity partners of, whatever demographic you're looking at? And yet those of us who support attorneys do just as much work and are just as involved. And so it kind of struck me as odd that we're not including that.
And to your point, that actually the legal profession is very diverse and very open. It's just not at that JD level, or that the partner level. It's actually everybody else who touches. I was just thinking about the visualization of all the hands that touch a legal document. And it's not just the lawyer. There is a chorus of hands of all different flavors, shapes, and sizes that work on these things and get them through the process. So I think it's kind of interesting because there's some corollaries in between business management and diversity and just sort of like the way we define how legal work gets done. So anyway, here's our thing. We do a lot of marketing. We do a lot of advertising advice on this show. And I'm thinking that a diversity of opinion is more important than just making sure you have, someone who is an Inuit, at the reception, be like, we got it covered. But I'm thinking like when it comes to running a successful business, it's like diversity is important, but that perspective, different opinions are just as important. Like with marketing advice, taglines you're thinking about doing, maybe most of your clients are Spanish speaking. Do you have somebody helping you write great Spanish content or helping you address these needs? I just think it's like, do you think there's more to diversity than just that lip service and then just that ticking off the box for the census? There's something more to it.
Right. And that's the whole difference between talking the talk and walking the walk.
Right.
In the writing industry, in like fiction writing, we have something called sensitivity readers. Because a lot of people, you want to write outside of your own little experience and you want to take that chance. But you can't, there are some things that you're just not going to be able to pull up from the inside because you've just never had that experience, and it's nobody's fault and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just an is. So the same thing kind of happens, and you can extrapolate this into just about any corporation or any business, whether it is marketing or whether it's other aspects of law. I think Starbucks is probably the best recent example where a decision was made. It was made by one or two people. If they had decision making in a group that was more diverse, somebody may have pumped the brakes and said, "Now hold on, let's think about this from this perspective."
Yep.
And they may have made a slightly different or better decision, and we see that every day. There are stories that come out every day about. Nike's had its problems, Google's had its problems, Yale had a problem with, somebody calling the police on a young woman who had fallen asleep studying in her dorm.
Right. Yep.
And if you consult people of different perspectives and different whatever, chances are you're going to make a better decision. And that happens in law, that happens in marketing. It's just, it's just human nature.
Well, so to build on that a little bit, I think it's interesting that I was thinking about this. Jake and I were talking about it a little bit before we hopped on here about exclusion and how a lot of times just because you haven't been exposed to things, you have these kind of opinions. And I think the couple examples you were just speaking about there are kind of like that. Like someone got it into their head that because this person who looks like they don't belong is here, that's an issue. And it's kind of what we're talking about is saying, well, what does belong? What do you mean belong? Why doesn't that person, why shouldn't they belong? Like, who are you? How are we making these judgments? I think that's interesting.
I think there's something to be said to just be around different cultures, different, whether it's demographics, sexual orientations, whatever, that it's, you have this thing in your head where it's this big, scary, whatever. Those are the people over there. But if you're working with someone every day, that changes it, man. That's just Nick, or that's Sally, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's this breaking down of barriers just by saying, hey, let's, we work together. That we put this document together, me and you. It doesn't matter, color has nothing to do with it anymore.
Right.
So I think that's sorry, and now I'll veer back on track. So what's something our listeners can do now, like in their firms or communities, to kind of increase that gender equality or diversity and inclusion? And on top of that, what do you see as the future of like a more diverse and inclusive legal community?
Well, for the future, I think we need to be a little less insular, and that's going to happen as it comes up. For attorneys, it's going to come up as more and more minorities, graduate from law school, decide to go to law school in the first place, and change things from within. So I think that's what's going to happen. We're seeing it happen. It's just a slow process, and everybody kind of wants everything to happen now, which is, totally understandable. But I think it's just going to take time, and you have to go through these growing pains. That's where we are right now. It's just a necessary process, and it's going to be painful. And you can say that about the country as a whole in general. We're kind of a microcosm of that. I think some things that we can do from, writing proposals and doing marketing, some of the things I've seen that we can do is demand that benchmark surveys ask about staff demographics. There's a lot of benchmark surveys out there. You'll see the best of lists, and everybody wants to be on them, but they mostly they all deal with attorneys. I don't know personally of any that include staff. Every now and then you'll see an RFP that asks for staff demographics, but that's very few and far between. And if RFPs don't ask for those staff demographics, provide them anyway, assuming that you already track them, which you should be, even if you're a small law firm, even if all the big law ones pretty much do. But if they're not, just provide them, throw them in there. I'm sure you have some boilerplate, offer them anyway, and then perhaps they'll say, oh, that's great. They provided these as well. Maybe we should be asking for these. The other thing I think is just to make it part of your firm culture. And that's a little more difficult. Some firms have it naturally and it just occurs. Other places where perhaps populations aren't so diverse, it's going to be a little more difficult. But I think really small steps will get you there eventually. And as far as firm culture, make sure you're hiring people who are good people. That's how you develop culture. Yes, you want them to be at the top of their class. You want them to be go-getters. Perhaps if it's a lateral hire, you want them to be, big bringers of revenue. However, are they good people at the end of the day? Are they open? Are they welcoming? Are they warm? Do they look like your clients? Are they going to be able to deal with all of your clients in an empathetic way? And I think that's absolutely key.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like, that's why I think it is a perception thing, and it's important because it translates meaning and value, but you have to put the engagement behind it. Like Pepsi doesn't have Jessica Tandy as a spokesperson, because they're like, well, is it a choice of a new generation if we have Jessica Tandy? It's like, you got to be really careful about the way you do this. But a lot of people are missing the forest for the trees here, particularly. Well, let's go for the millennials. Well, do you know? I think that's a really important part, is track the demographics, not only of your staff, but of your clients and people who are coming into your firm and availing themselves of your services. You got to make sure you're speaking their language, because if you're all in on millenniality and apps and, everything's PDF, but a lot of these people don't have that technological background. They're kind of a rural population. That's going to rub them the wrong way, and you're actually going to cause problems. This is cool. So at QTAC Rock, do you guys do that? Do you include wider demographics, that include all the staff? Because I think that shows a little bit different story, and that might cause more people of like lawyers of color to join in, because do you guys have any way to establish that at your firm or support any, entities?
We're definitely trying.
Oh, wow.
We were founded on, sort of an egalitarian philosophy in the 60s, when hiring women was diversity. That's what it was.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And then, through the years, everybody's had their ups and downs and their bumps. And like I said before, the growing pains. We have affinity groups for a lot of different races, nationalities, and interests. We have a veterans group. We have our African American one. We have LGBTQIA. We've had some smaller ones. We have working parents. Anybody who has something like that has some specific issues that they might want to talk about. It helps them connect with people. Plus, we have 18 offices, so this helps you connect with people all throughout the firm, not just in your location. Some offices are smaller than others, and so there might not be another person at your office who looks like you or has your experience. And connecting with someone across the country who does have that can really bring you closer as a firm and as a culture. So
Awesome.
I had a follow-up to the one before, if you don't mind backtracking just for a sec. We were talking about different, diversity and having more people, whether it's, lawyers of different races or whatever. Something Jake and I were kind of kicking around too, and I think you mentioned that you had brought it up, was an income barrier. That it's very difficult for someone who's, coming up from a family that is facing economic hardship, or maybe is always, that part of the country is just the jobs are running out or whatever. There's almost an invisible barrier there, again, where you're just not going to see that kind of diversity that maybe we would like.
I think access to legal school and college in general is kind of an overarching larger problem that I don't think law firms can necessarily fix. There's no magic wand, but but you can vary your hiring practices, do pipeline activities, get out in the communities that you work in and live in and where your clients are, make an effort, and then support people once they're here. Make sure they're supported. Make sure, I think some of the examples, the article I wrote was based on another article that I read, and it was something that hadn't occurred to me until it struck a nerve, that people are uncomfortable. You have a certain sort of idea of what a law firm is and what it looks like, and the big tall building with the people in suits and brass everywhere, and that might be intimidating to somebody who grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment on the the wrong side of the tracks, who went to school, got out of there, is looking to move up. They're going to feel a little bit like a fish out of water. I think, again, it's the growing pains. It's just something that's going to happen, and we all have to adjust. And I think just being aware of it and talking about it does help a lot.
You've written very exquisitely about it, and I appreciate you spending your time and giving us your perspective on it. So how can people learn more about you, Stephanie?
I think LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me.
Dig it. So we will put a link in here. And then are you ready for the 5 questions?
Sure. I'm a little scared.
Oh, I'm scared too.
I do this every time and I'm scared.
5 questions we ask everyone.
What was the last book you read?
Oh, it was a book for book club here at work, actually. So you want to talk about diversity, you get a real big overview of things that you wouldn't normally read, that's for sure. I think it was called Whispers of the Bayou.
Number 2, what is your favorite place?
Favorite place? Oh, Dauphin Island, Alabama.
Righteous. Number 3, what sites, blogs, newsletters, or podcasts do you regularly check in with?
Oh my goodness, a lot of legal ones. Just because that's what I only have time for.
I know. I hear you. All right. Number 4, if you were stranded on a desert island and could only pick one condiment to take with you, what would it be?
Ooh, mustard.
It's very surprisingly common answer. Excellent.
Well, but I want to know, is it yellow? Is it French? Is it a whole grain kind of thing? Or?
No, I'm middle class. I'll go with the yellow Frenches.
Me too.
Solid. A good choice. All right, we made it to the end. Number 5. After a long day or a long week at work, how do you relax and unwind?
I sit in my favorite recliner, and my dog comes up on my lap and just snuggles, and he is just the cutest little thing ever. So he's a good relaxing buddy.
For show notes, links, and info, go to thelawsomepodcast.com or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. Be sure to leave us a review and rating in iTunes or wherever you find the you listen to. Until next week, stay lawsome.
It's Jake and Paul, y'all. It's Jake and Paul, y'all. It's Jake and Paul, y'all.